So we are going to be recording this meeting. Hello, Dr. Menon. And so please do not share any confidential information because it will be recorded for the archives and teaching purposes for our students and staff in future. So I presume you can all hear me in a minute. Dr. Longo is going to be taking charge. We will have time for questions and answers. And if there's any technical glitch, we have one or two computers, so we will get it going. So without much ado, my friend and colleague, Dr. Lance Longo. Lance? Okay. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Bedi, and thank you to the USA Jung Foundation and the Kripa Foundation for inviting me again to be a guest, and I'm happy to share some of the things that I have learned over the years, and hope that you can reciprocate with your experiences when we're done. Okay, so we have the fortune of treating individuals with addictions and having broad-reaching effects. It's not just an individual that we treat, but all of the people that that individual touches. And it's really been estimated that 10 to 15% of the population has a lifetime prevalence of addiction. And if you think about 3 generations of a family, grandparents, parents, and kids, that means that about a third of individuals are touched or affected by a loved one who's addicted to alcohol or other drugs. And it's really not just the effect of the acute intoxicating effect of somebody coming home drunk at the end of the day, but really the lifelong effects, the economic burden, the health care burden, trauma, neglect, abuse, abandonment, divorce, unwanted pregnancies, affected marriages, criminal costs that are the fallout of addiction that families feel. So it may cross generations, it may have broad-reaching effects. Now, addictive disorders alter family roles, customs, rules, cultural rituals, and unfortunately the stigma of addiction leads to cover-ups and secrets that don't talk, don't feel, don't trust, methods that develop and overwhelm traditional values. And the gradual progression of intermittent chronic and the intermittent chronic nature of addiction often leads to the acceptance amongst friends and family members that the addict will not or cannot change. And so the conspiracy of silence or enabling and some of the sad fracturing of families really persists, unfortunately. So what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about a couple of ways that family members may help a loved one to get into treatment or to change their addictive behaviors. We're going to first talk about a soft cell approach called community reinforcement. And then we're going to kind of shift at the end into a more hard cell approach, a formal intervention. And I would like it if you think of this as kind of a road trip analogy. You don't just tell somebody, well, I want you to stop drinking, and you get from point A to point B without a travel experience. It's like traveling across India or in the United States from New York to Los Angeles. You may have a map, you may have a goal, you may have sites you want to see along the way, but inevitably you'll run across a detour or a place where there's road construction, or your car may break down, or you may end up seeing sites that you didn't envision or plan for in the beginning. But it doesn't mean you have to start over and go back to where you started in order to kind of get to your goal or your final destination. And part of impacting families really has to do with the experience of the trip, the travel experience, learning things along the way to maybe improve your communications, your relationships, your quality of life, and hopefully just getting sober isn't the end point, but also improving family relationships. So that's a short introduction to what we're going to talk about today. And we'll start with a quote. And oftentimes people think, unless the substance user wants to get better and is a voluntary client, there's very little you can do for them. And I'll just ask you to think about that. Um, does a person have to come in and ask for treatment in order to change? If we're going to talk first a little bit as a therapist-client relationship, but the reality is this is something that we're going to teach family members. And the reality is that sanctions and enticements in the family, school, and employment settings can significantly and positively impact behavior and recovery. It's really all about carrots and sticks. How do we kind of push people from the backside and draw them in from the front side to make changes in their life and in their behaviors? So the community reinforcement approach is really defined as being able to use these motivating forces, employment, friendship, family, recreational reinforcers of the user in such a way that returning to substance use would trigger withholding these reinforcers. All right, and a lot of what I'm going to speak about today is outlined in a book that I hand out to a lot of family members who have afflicted individuals who are in treatment at our facility. It's called Get Your Loved One Sober, Alternatives to Nagging, Pleading, and Threatening by Robert Myers. And I'd recommend that people kind of get a hold of a copy of this and practice using it in your clinical practice, and perhaps even share it with family members or family therapy programs that you're involved with. For those of you who were with me a couple of months ago, I spoke about motivational enhancement. Why do people change and how do they change? Well, people change because the costs of behavior outweigh the benefits, or the other way around, the benefits outweigh the costs. So again, it's carrots and sticks. Those who believe they can and will change do. The concept of self-efficacy. And what clients say about change is important. It may be that their motivating forces are different than what we assume they are, or that they're reinforcers, whether they be positive or negative, are things that are not overtly aware to us, but that they can share with us. Change occurs in the stages of change framework that we spoke about the last time I was with this crowd. People don't necessarily have a sense of awareness that they have a problem initially. They may be pre-contemplative. Then they may say, well, I'm starting to think that I need to make some behavioral changes in my life. They may make some preparations or research how changes actually occur. And if people think about diet, exercise, smoking cessation, most people go through these psychological changes multiple times in their life before they get to an action step, actually needing to do something about a behavior. Sometimes that action step is a bad thing that's happened to them. Driving under the influence ticket, or a medical event. And then once a person makes behavioral changes, they need to continue to work on maintaining it and deal with relapses. And again, I personally can say that I've started an exercise regimen multiple times and worked my way through these steps. I've started a diet or a pursuit of a goal a number of occasions. And this is a fluctuant and cyclical pattern. It just does it. It's not a point A to point B linear mindset that occurs. And when we talk about our treatment approaches, we have to match those to the stage of change that a person is at. If you mismatch, it's likely that your client, your patient, your loved one is going to drop out of treatment or tune you out. So in a person who's really not thinking about changing yet, our goal is to promote awareness of the addiction on their life. If a person has begun to contemplate that they have a problem, we want to increase their awareness and help them to overcome their ambivalence to making changes or becoming abstinent. Once a person is ready to prepare, we want to roll out the red carpet, help them to identify resources, goals, and strategies to support cutting down or becoming abstinent. And when a person's really in an action stage, then we want to facilitate the implementation of the plan, emphasize coping skills, problem solving, social skills, drink refusal skills, how to avoid people, places, and things, and stay engaged in a recovery plan. And in the maintenance phase, we want to facilitate the development of those roles and habits so that they become routine, just like drinking or drug use was in the past. So motivation can be influenced by a number of factors, either negative or positive. Distress, if we feel uncomfortable, if we feel anxiety, that's usually a motivating force that we need to make some changes in our life. There may be critical life events, again, illness, injury, legal issues, job-related threats or sanctions, fear of losing a relationship, or other consequences. There may be cognitive evaluation and appraisal. Hey, I'm getting too old for this. Or if I really want to function and take care of my family, I have to change my ways. There may be recognition of negative consequences, or there may be positive internal and external incentives. So, better social rewards, better relationships with people that I want to be with, um, uh, a possibility of advancement in a job. So the principles of motivational enhancement therapy are that we need to express empathy to a person who's really ambivalent about making changes. Boy, I understand that this is a big step for you, and that to give up some of these friends and relationships that used to be fun because you have to have a more responsible life is bothersome. But what you've said in terms of developing discrepancy here is that um, you like to drink, for example, but the drinking is causing you problems. Or you go out with friends after work and you think you can just have one beer, but one beer leads to four, five, or six and additional problems. You want to try to avoid argumenting, roll with their resistance, and make it a collaborative process and really support self-efficacy. That change is possible, but it really has to come from them. In one of my mantras that I share with patients is that treatment doesn't happen to you, it happens with you. You have to be a partner in the process. And this is kind of the motivational approach rather than the finger wagging approach that may have been used in addictions treatment in the past. So again, to summarize change processes, we need to raise a person's consciousness that there really is a problem. We need to give them some socially liberating alternatives, some fun things to do that don't involve drinking or drug use. Arouse their emotions, express feelings about their problems and about the benefits of being clean and sober. And also do this with family members. And then there's that constant process of self-reevaluation. And again, to kind of take it out of the stigma of addiction, think of diet, exercise, pursuit of leisure activities or hobbies. We always want to think about, what are we doing right and what are we doing wrong to achieve our goals. So the community reinforcement approach is really a behavioral approach to substance use. It focuses on identifying reinforcers in a person's environment that compete with substance use. So again, what we want to do is set up something that makes giving up something worthwhile. So if you're going to give up a part of your social life, namely alcohol or drug use, we want to have something that is at least equally as rewarding. So we want to continually use positive reinforcement to increase a person's engagement and to help shape behavior. And again, for those of you who have kids, all of this is easier said than done. We like to give rewards rather than punishment. But in reality, this is what works. It's harder to do, and it takes more time and effort. But we want to help our client to develop skills and become more conscious of these positive reinforcers. So it's really behavioral learning theory. And again, if you think of child rearing, it's not that much different. It is individualized based on what the person who we want to help change really values. Again, it's not our own value system. It's what they see as rewarding. So when we start with the community reinforcement approach, and I'll first speak about what we do as therapists and then kind of translate this into how family members use the same approach. So a spouse or a husband of a person who's got an alcohol or drug problem is going to basically learn this same approach. And in fact, a lot of this community reinforcement approach is sort of our role as a clinician is to help to coach and to guide, um, this to happen, on the home front in the sort of the scene of the crime. So we want to positively reinforce the client for coming into treatment and actually completing an assessment and at least acknowledging that they may have something that they want to work with. We want to look for reinforcers. Okay, what are the reasons that you do drink? What are the reasons that you wouldn't want to drink? And what could compete with drinking that would give you the same um, effect, whether it be stress relief, enjoyment, detachment, a sense of comfort that you might not ordinarily have in your life. So what are the motivations? And are they internal or external? And what does the client really want from treatment? What are they doing? Where are they going? And how do we help them to achieve that goal without the use of alcohol or other drugs? And part of what we do with this is called a functional analysis. What we do is really, again, speaking as a clinician, or if you're a therapist and you have a client who you really want to dissect their rationale for drinking or drug use, you want to really go over the process of using, the thought process, the behavioral process of using. So if a person says, after work I feel stressed out, I'm going to go home and I'm going to have screaming kids tugging at me, wanting me to either play with them or fix things. My wife is going to want to just dump them in my lap because she's been busy all day. And I need to stop and have a drink before I go home to that. What you want to do is analyze that whole process. We call it an autopsy or a dissection to really look at what are the intellectual or cognitive thought processes that go into stopping for a drink on the way home or drinking as soon as you get in the door versus having alternative approaches. So you want to identify triggers and consequences of substance use. And if you play the tape forward as we talk about it, what will happen after I have a drink or two? Well, it may lead to 3 or 4. It may lead my wife to be angry with me. It may lead to me actually not spending a quality time with my kids or getting things done that I need to when I do get home. And so you want to be able to think about what are the consequences. And then you want to examine non-using behaviors and think about what could really be as reinforcing, what has worked in the past as an alternative to drinking, what have I done on days when I don't come home to drink, and what can I do in the future? And how can we increase the likelihood of these alternative non-using behaviors? And there are certainly ways that spouses or significant others may help to modulate that. And we'll talk about that a little bit. One may be, just as an example, if a wife is sort of clued into this sort of therapy and actually has had these discussions with her husband, they may agree that, you know what, honey, when you come home on certain days of the week, I'm going to have kind of ushered the kids into a different room to play. And I'm going to give you, we're going to try to carve out a half hour for you to kind of get settled in. Maybe I'll have some tea waiting for you. Maybe we can talk about your day a little bit. And I'll give you a little time to chill out before you're kind of caught up in the whirlwind of coming home. So that's just an example of an alternative. And then, what we as therapists would do is really kind of coach the family member into helping to also do this functional analysis or
Nance.
dissection of the usual pattern.
Hello, Dr. Nance.
Yes.
Dr. Joe here.
Yes.
Can you
Hi, Father Joe.
can you be a little more slow? because the
Okay.
sound in the hall is a little getting. Uh,
Gotcha. I understand.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
if you can be a little slow, it will help us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What I'm saying. Okay. Thank you, Father Joe. Okay. So again, the goals of counseling are to be brief, positive, specific, and behavioral. And I don't know if you have, I don't know if they have a slide there, Dr. Beatty, to see this because I'm sort of assuming that they can see this. Maybe they can just listen. I don't know. Okay. So the goals are really the clients or the addicted family members' goals. So what their goals may be different than ours, and I think the process of meeting them, lend to an increase in their happiness. So goal setting is really a communication skill exercise. It's really not a task to be completed. So again, for example, this requires that a spouse would be assertive enough to say to their husband or wife, um, "Listen, we have a mutual goal that we want to have a happier relationship. Um, I, I, I think that you're drinking too much, and I want, and that usually leads to a fight when you come home after you've been drinking. So what we want to do is together, if we want a better relationship, I want to help you to find some alternative to drinking." And so it's not only the task of not drinking, but the exercise in communication. So one of the outcomes of the community reinforcement approach is actually taking these secrets out of the closet and making and having people speak about them. Now I understand that in many ways, India may have more of a patriarchal relationship than between husband and wife than in America. But I also understand that arguments happen and that spouses generally feel comfortable discussing things. So this is really a communication goal, and communication usually leads to greater bonding in a relationship. So again, it's all about skills development versus education. It's client driven. It involves practice, coaching, diligence, reevaluation, and building rewards. And the more you do that, the more you build trust and self-esteem. So again, the skills needed to support recovery and improve quality of life are communication skills, problem-solving skills, development of social and leisure activities, drink and drug refusal skills, managing employment, craving, relapse, tolerating distress and frustration, and trying to build better quality family time. Now, one of the tools that we can use in this model are what's called a sobriety sample, where we try to typically a person who does not yet believe that they're an alcoholic or have a drinking problem will say, "You know what, I can quit anytime I want," or "I can have one beer instead of six." And what we try to negotiate as clinicians is what we call a sobriety sample. So a break from their substance use. And what it does is allow us a chance to heighten awareness, talk about how difficult it might be or what are the challenges, to find alternatives to drinking, and to help disrupt some of the old habits and really and develop some new habits. Sometimes we ask people to complete a drinking diary to keep track of on a little calendar book how much, how often they drink, why they drink, what the drinking does for them, what the drinking does against them. So what are the positive and negative consequences? And to really take, what may be a misperception and to clarify it. And again, it's the process of heightening awareness in the person who is drinking, and also helping the spouse or the significant other to track it and to try to understand the world through their eyes. Again, the concept of empathy. Now, we always have to let people know that a drinking diary is only as good as how honest a person is in tracking it. And a drink is a beer, 30 cc's of hard liquor, or a glass of wine. It's not a big bottle of hard liquor. And if a person really wants to be honest and to track their drinking behaviors, they have to share that. One of the things we teach people is to kind of create some emotional connections to why they drink. In AA, they say when you feel like drinking, just say halt. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? Again, to try to connect something emotionally to the urge to drink. And it's a matter of putting time and distance between the thoughts and the action. And to try to identify, am I really drinking as a means of self-medicating, or because there's a void in my life? And what can I do instead, for example, to fill the void of loneliness, or to take the edge off of my angry emotions, or to help me to relax? And then to look for alternatives that are healthier and not so disruptive to one's family. Oops, I did this one. So again, if we're doing a sobriety sample, we want to try to identify, we want to try to get a person to spend enough time not drinking that they actually have an experience of not just white knuckling a couple of days or a week of non-drinking, but to actually let a chance to let the dust settle and the cobwebs clear, and for them to really be able to experience sobriety. We want to identify threats and find alternative activities. And I put yoga in here because I'm sure Father Joe would have a lot to say about how, especially detox yoga, helps to establish a period, the initial period of sobriety. And there are a number of asanas and poses and yoga poses and positions that really do help to establish a better connection with one's body and to develop one's initial spirit of recovery. We want to teach families to reinforce that sobriety sample, that when a person is first attempting to stop drinking, that they're extra nice to them, that they do nice things around the house. The kids are more polite. The wife has a nice dinner set up when he comes home, and maybe offers to sit with him and massage his shoulders, or to help him to ease into the night. Again, there's a sense of empathy and support. This isn't just the person who has the addictions experience. It's a family experience. We're all in this together. Now, craft is when you include the family therapy to the community reinforcement approach, and it's really used to help the concerned significant other, the family member, cope with the substance use. And it recognizes that there is an ability to influence change within the family, and it is effective for parents of adolescents who are alcohol or drug users. The craft model really challenges concerned significant others, parents, spouses, to identify their ineffective responses to substance use. So the onus of responsibility here is not just on the substance abuser, but also on the family member to find the right way of reinforcing or intervening in the behavior. So it challenges them to positively influence the user towards either non-use or reduced use or safer use. So the goals are to stop substance use, to help to engage them in treatment, and to improve their own self-care, sort of in an Al-Anon approach, that you have to be mindful of the impact on you and the negativity that arises from that. So the closer the concerned significant other is to the user, the easier it is to influence change. And there are contingencies to reward. There's gentle but consistent pressure, and work to eliminate their own behaviors that reinforce substance use. So interventions help to use positive reinforcers. So, again, what is it that I can do to help my loved one who comes home from work or who comes home from school to have a good night at home so they don't feel compelled to use? And we tend to, the person, it really is kind of a communication skill. How do we develop a behavior, a communication pattern that's based on honesty and collaboration? So if a person comes home and they've got alcohol on their breath and the husband or wife immediately starts yelling at them or nagging or pleading or threatening them, usually that's not a reinforcing approach. Um, more reinforcing approach might be to ignore the behavior and step away from it. And we'll talk about that in a little bit here. I'm going to kind of move on. I think the key point is, though, that the reinforcements need to be relevant to the user, not the affected family member. So it really is what's important to the person with addiction that will change their behavior. From a family member's perspective, it requires a lot of dissection of that roadmap. What is the pattern of drinking and the arguments that has not led to positive change in the past, and how can I work to change that the next time around? So again, it requires defining the problem, brainstorming, thinking about alternatives. And again, this may be a collaborative brainstorming approach with the person who's addicted, not while they're drunk or high. I mean, but it may be, hey, let's look at what happened last night. You came home drunk again, and we got into an argument. You went and slept in one room. I went and slept in the other. We both woke up this morning feeling lousy. So how might we change that next time around? So we want to brainstorm. What are some alternative approaches? Evaluate, select a solution, try it, track it. If it doesn't work, reevaluate, refine, or try something else. And again, most of us who are parents have been through this, and we can kind of shake our finger at our kids and tell them to do one thing or another. But eventually, if we're lucky, we settle on something that works as a reinforcer. It might be that if you've got a teenager who wants to do something on a Friday night and use the car, well, they have to earn that. It becomes a positive reinforcer rather than a punishment uh, uh, that ends up affecting behavioral change. So rewards generally are more beneficial than punishments. Punishment sometimes may be taking away rewards. Again, it might be for a husband and wife. Intimacy may really depend on you not having been drinking that night. It might be that that's the reward that happens for your sobriety. The big chill might be one of the ways that we respond. In other words, detachment. It might be that rather than coming home to a family dinner, um, that, you know what, you're going to eat dinner alone and we're going to all kind of do our thing tonight because you've been drinking and we don't want to spend our quality time with you under those conditions. We want to use I statements, not you're a lousy drunk, but you know what, I feel neglected, abandoned, and disrespected when you come home having been drinking. It makes me feel like um, I'm not good enough for you when you're sober. Um, there may be small behavioral modification changes, and again, it's all about tracking it, not giving up. Because again, too many family members of individuals with addiction kind of give up, write it off. Things aren't going to change, and this is the way we're going to kind of be stuck rather than living happily ever after. There's an acronym, pious communication. Be positive, begin with I statements. I care about our relationship, and um, and I'm concerned about your health, and I really wish you would, um, cut down or stop your drinking. I understand that you're stressed out, you work hard, and at the end of the day, you feel like you need a reward. And I'm willing to share in the responsibility to help you to feel better at the end of the day. But it's got to be a collaborative effort, and it's got to be something that's not damaging to our family. So again, the craft interventions are really a process of coping that are based on communication, problem solving, looking at social and leisure activities. What can we do together so you don't feel like you have to go drink alone? Monitoring these things, and helping to cope with distress and frustration, both on the part of the individual who is the alcoholic or addict and on the part of the family. How do we manage our own distress over the situation? So again, sort of the Al-Anon approach. I may not be able to change you, but at least I'm going to do something so that I'm not um, um, stressed out and losing sleep and feeling miserable. And there are all sorts of self-care skills that go along with that. So one of the outcomes of a craft intervention, this kind of process, and again, this is a process. This isn't a one-time intervention. This is something that occurs over time. Again, it's like a road trip. There are going to be detours along the way. There are going to be places that you stop and you feel like you've lost your direction and you have to backtrack. But if the initial goal is to get a person to acknowledge that they have a problem or enter treatment, over time, people who really stick to this approach can be successful. Statistics in a guided craft intervention. And again, a therapist might be working with a family member who's not addicted, helping them to coach, to get some coaching and guidance through this process. So, it may be that your husband or wife who is the alcoholic is not in treatment. You may be the one who's seeing a therapist who's helping you to assess these drinking patterns, these family dynamics, and to find alternatives that might be useful. And it's really about learning to protect yourself, set limits, find community resources, and identify your own behaviors, which might limit your effectiveness as an influencer. Okay. Um, in Al-Anon terms and in the addiction field, enabling is kind of a dirty word, but it really is important because there are many family members who are trying to be supportive, who are either being the fixer or the protector. I'm going to help you to save your job by calling in sick for you while you're hungover, or I don't want you to drink and drive, so I'm going to go out and buy you alcohol so you can stay at home and drink. And instead of nagging, pleading, and threatening about drinking behaviors, there's sometimes to avoid enabling, we have to withdraw. Now, all of this is easier said than done, and you have to kind of pick and choose your battles. Um, a healthy partner may say, you know what, I don't want you to drive home drunk from the bar. So if you need me to pick you up, I'd rather have you call me than kill yourself or kill somebody else or get into a car accident. But we're going to talk about that tomorrow. Now, again, these are things that in Al-Anon terms, tie in with the concept of codependence, and codependence is defined in the DSM-4 as continued investment of self-esteem and the ability to influence or control feelings and behavior, both in oneself and others, in the face of serious adverse consequences. So again, kind of a divestment of one's own self-esteem and sense of identity in a futile attempt to help others. And it's usually based on fear, anger, and fear of abandonment. if they refuse to gratify an unreasonable demand. And as a result, the codependent person will not be able to maintain their personal integrity or boundaries, but instead join in the addicted individual's denial system. So I know that codependence as a term has kind of fallen out of vogue, but I believe that it still exists. And we all have certain codependent relationships in our lives, but certainly the way that that an individual joins in the denial system of an addicted individual is counter-therapeutic and tends to um, help the addiction persist rather than end. In terms of adolescence, parental influence is critical. Um, Parents can positively influence or negatively influence their kids. If every time there's a family social event and the parents are drinking, they're modeling that sort of behavior. But parents can protect against a kid's involvement in drugs by really being vigilant, monitoring them, maintaining rituals of connection, meals, quality times, being authoritative and not permissive, and again, modeling an ability to live an alcohol and drug-free life. So, despite our thoughts that as adolescents we're losing influence over our kids, most of us still remain the most influential people in our teens' lives. All right, so that's all the soft sell stuff. So again, community reinforcement really requires a lot of patience on the part of family members. It's not giving up. It's not getting angry. It's not um, accepting that things can never change. It's persistent love, caring, positive reinforcement, and communication. And again, the timing is important. You can't have that kind of a caring, loving, thoughtful conversation when your significant other comes home drunk at midnight. It's something that is something to be talked about the next day and not in the heat of the moment. And many times this requires some coaching or cheerleading or guidance from a therapist or a group like Al-Anon. And I think many of the principles of community reinforcement are adhered to through Al-Anon. Maybe a little more detachment is emphasized rather than engagement. But if I guess my feelings are that if you really love somebody, you don't give up, and the sooner you try this positive reinforcement approach, the more likely you are to salvage a relationship and for there to be less family damage. Okay, so the second part of this talk is going to be more of the hard sell approach, uh, um, the actual formal intervention. So if a person truly is an alcoholic and they can't make behavioral changes, or if you truly had found that the soft sell, community reinforcement, communication, trying to find alternatives really hasn't worked, there there are formal interventions. So what do you do when you've got a friend, a family member, or a coworker who has a serious problem but doesn't see it or won't do anything about it? So and people who are really addicted and trying to hide or maintain their addiction will minimize the amount that they're drinking. They'll be grandiose or dishonest about it. I don't have a problem, or if I want to control my drinking, I can. They'll hide their bottles of alcohol. They will not acknowledge how much or how often they've been drinking. They'll feel entitled to it. Hey, I work hard, and this is my reward. They'll project. I drink because you're driving me crazy, or I drink because it's the only way that I can cope. They may be in despair. I'm a hopeless case, or my life is leading me nowhere, so why not drink? They may split. They may say, you know what, my doctor told me a glass of wine a day is good for my heart, or my friends can do it, and I don't drink as much as them. So there are all sorts of denial mechanisms that addicts use, and on the flip side, that family members use. Again, addiction is a stigmatized illness, and family members may also use some of these same defense mechanisms to minimize how much their spouse is drinking, or to lie about it, or to say, you know what, he deserves to have fun once in a while. He works hard. Or what's the point? You know, our relationship is no good anyway, so why not? Anyway, I got a phone call the other day from a friend of mine who's in a business organization, and they were having a lunch meeting with a couple of guys that get together every month. And he said, there's the five or six of these guys were talking and saying, one of the guys wasn't there for the lunch meeting, and they knew he was drinking too much. The guy was a known partier. He had been kicked out of a country club this summer, and his wife was at wit's end. Apparently, he had a couple of breakdowns where she was crying and feeling worried about the fact that he had an operating under the influence ticket. This particular business owner had failed to show up to work and meetings on several occasions, and this group of guys knew that he was just out at a lake house kind of drinking and pulling a disappearing act. And they said they'd all kind of mentioned things to him along the way, and his wife had, and he never really believed that he had a problem, or would kind of blow it off. And they were wondering, what can we do more formally to kind of put some teeth into this, to make to create a formal intervention. So the Johnson intervention was coined after an Episcopalian priest back in the 1970s who designed this to gather significant people together to help to break through an addict's denial system. And it was designed to help substance users recognize their addiction and enter treatment. And it involves a gathering of friends and family members who share their observations of a substance user's behavior and make a very strong and formal request for him to enter treatment. And there are really obstacles to entering treatment that they address prior to the intervention. This is a planned out process so that things are ready to go if, in fact, the person who's the target of the intervention agrees to it. Now, this slide, for those of you who do have it, is going to be impossible to read. But, again, interventions oftentimes should match the stage of sobriety if possible. And for people who don't really think that they have a problem, an intervention might just be that a number of people who care about the person get together and sort of raise their awareness. And the goal may be just that it's a wake-up call. The person who's contemplating having a problem, it may be more of an action step. I know I should stop using, and, maybe I'm going to try not to drink for a month, and I'm going to try to find some alternatives. For those who have been planning, it's an opportunity to get them to follow through with their plans, and for those who have actually been thinking about an action step, this may be the final wake-up call, and the plans are kind of ready and made, and the person is assisted into treatment. So there are a number of intervention guidelines. First of all, you want to gather significant individuals in a person's life, and this is usually 4, 5, 6, 7 people, family members, coworkers, maybe an employer, and you want to have people give specific feedback, be empathic and concerned, prepare and rehearse this process, review treatment options, and use benevolent coercion. So, we care about you, so we really believe that this is what you need to do. The timing and location is important, and we're going to talk about these steps in a minute. You have to expect objections, denial, minimization, some sort of pushback from the target of the intervention. And just realize that there's no unsuccessful intervention. The only unsuccessful intervention is one that's not made. In retrospect, I think we all treat individuals who may have said, you know what, if somebody would have just really kind of raised my awareness about this years ago, I'd be in a better spot right now. I had a patient the other day who said, you know what, nobody really told me I drank too much. I could tell people were looking at me funny, or I was kind of the life of the party. But when I went to he got married last year, and he stopped drinking when he went to his wife to be's father and said, you know, I want to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage. He was very proper about it. And his father-in-law now said, well, you know, I think you're a great guy, but you got to stop drinking. I'm worried about my daughter marrying you. And he was like shocked. He didn't realize that it was that overt. And that in and of itself what got him into treatment. So that was a simple intervention, but very straightforward, clear cut, and heartfelt. And if his father-in-law wouldn't have said that, he thinks that I mean, life would have gone on and bad things would have continued to happen. So in order to plan an intervention, you want to recruit members of the intervention team. Again, usually 3 to 7 members. Even kids are okay. You want to have a couple of prepared meetings with the intervention team to establish the plan and I agree on a place and what sort of treatment is available if the intervention is successful, and set a date for it. Again, people who participate should be knowledgeable, be very well known to the individual who's the target of the intervention. There ought to be a single person who's an interventionist, perhaps a therapist, who's outside of the direct family, who can kind of guide the process and be an independent sort of referee in it. And it's okay to notify the person that you're going to have an intervention, but most interventions are kind of surprises. There's a certain shock and awe value to a person walking into a room where there are a number of people gathered to specifically address and confront head on the addictive problem. Now, beforehand, I had asked Dr. Bedi to send around an example of an intervention gone bad, and I don't know if anybody had a chance to see it from The Sopranos, but it is on the link, and it's an example of how not to do an intervention, but it is funny if you can tolerate the American profanity and vulgarity of an Italian mob family in New Jersey. So when you prepare for the intervention, it's important that the chemically dependent person to know that they're the person who has to change their lifestyle. The other significant people involved have to realize that this person is probably going to experience intense emotions, probably minimize what they hear, and likely sort of push back. But you're really sharing this experience. So an intervention actually tends to be therapeutic for the people involved. They're not silent and secret anymore. They're sort of bonded together with at least kind of sharing the impact of the addicted person's effect on their lives with each other, which in itself is empowering. The task for family participants is to, really make this a formal process. It's non-judgmental. The idea is to write a one-page letter to the client on how you've been impacted. It's factual. I phrases. I watched you the night of my graduation. Spell out specific events. Be specific on how you were personally impacted. I was embarrassed. End your letter with, agreed upon demands for change. I want you to get into treatment and stop drinking. It really is important to me because I love you or I care about you. that you do something to save your life. And don't you also may want to include, especially a spouse, what you'll do if they choose not to follow through. So you don't want to make idle threats, but an intervention is a time where a wife or a husband or a son or a daughter or a parent may say, you know what, I can't live with you anymore if you're going to continue to lead this kind of life. And that's part of the teeth behind the intervention. Again, it has to be something you're willing to follow through on. You don't want to attack or berate or name call the individual. There's an example letter, and I don't know if I should read the whole thing, but again, it's specific details. Um, I have been feeling hurt and frightened. I'm concerned about this behavior. The other night, I watched you drink a bottle of hard liquor and then get into the car to go get another one, and I was worried you're going to kill yourself or somebody else. Your behavior is out of control, and I'm afraid that you're going to die or I'm going to die watching you die. And I have investigated a treatment center that is willing to take you tomorrow. And I really love you. I want you to save your life. I want you to save our family. And I really want you to enter treatment. Please, I'm concerned about you. Please enter treatment tomorrow. If you choose not to, I need to move out until you seek help. I need to protect myself and our kids from this. So again, that's an example letter. Now the idea is when you're writing this script, the interventionist, which may be one of you therapists, if you don't have a trained interventionist, it can be one family member or one coworker or one friend who takes on this role and really learns how to do this. And there are articles and scripts for how to actually do an intervention. So what you want to do is write a script, list a couple of incidents, list how you felt during those times, write out what you want the person to do and what you're willing to do to help to get the treatment they need and what you're willing to do if they're not going to get the treatment that you think they need. So the interventionist task is to guide this, to review the letters ahead of time, make sure that they're as non-judgmental and that they're specific enough. Um, you don't want somebody writing a letter and saying, you're a piece of crap, and unless you get treatment, I'm going to throw you out of the house, you bum. That's too attacking and confrontational and just going to lead somebody to become defensive and angry in return. So again, loving, caring statements, empathy. I understand what you're going through, but it's not just about you. You're affecting me, you're affecting our family, you're affecting the safety of others. The timing and the location of an intervention are important. You obviously don't want to do an intervention when somebody comes home drunk. You want to set an appropriate time where the person will not be under the influence or in withdrawal, where it's safe for all members. You don't want to say we're going to meet at this crack house or this bar in the back room. You want to make sure that you have a safety plan and that there is a treatment plan and referral information. Ideally, you'll have wanted to contact the treatment facility, or the outcome or the objective of an intervention may be, you know what, we care about you. We're not trained professionals, and we think we know what an alcoholic or an addict is, but we're not sure. So we want you to see a professional. We want you to see, and we've arranged for you to see a counselor or a therapist or a doctor at this place at this time. Tomorrow, the next day, the sooner the better, so that a person can't back out of it. But it may be that the object, in fact, probably the most common objective of an intervention is to actually get a formal professional assessment and then have an agreed upon plan that the alcohol or drug addicted family member will follow through with the treatment recommendations of somebody who is knowledgeable in this field. So again, during the intervention, you want to explain what is actually going on. Hey, we're not just springing this and ganging up on you. We're here because we're all concerned. We want to let everybody read their letter to the target, and ask him or her not to respond until everybody's um, had a chance to kind of say their piece. So what happens if the intervention fails? Well, the reality is about 2/3 of people who have a formal intervention, at least in the United States, will actually enter treatment or go to the referral that they've been asked to go to. And about a third complete. So, outcomes are again, it's coerced and a person may not yet believe it, but you're planting seeds and hopefully moving them along the stages of change. So at least this isn't a hidden problem anymore. A person who may have been pre-contemplative or contemplated may actually have moved along that process of awareness to recognizing they have a problem. It helps family members and friends increase their influence. They're using positive and negative reinforcement, and helps them to bond in that, and embrace the concept of detachment, and help to avoid enabling and the kind of code of secret and silence that goes around helping a person stay, or enabling a person to stay undercover in their addiction. And it helps family and friends understand the need to protect themselves. And again, shared vulnerability leads to empowerment amongst the people involved in the intervention. So if an intervention fails, we can always go back 100 years to the Sears Roebuck catalog and use Dr. Chase's nerve and brain pills, and at least say that we've planted some seeds, and feel good about it. But I would encourage people who do have a chance to see the clip that I sent along. The intervention is staged appropriately, but there's sort of a funny outcome that uh, goes bad. So with that, I'll open this up to any other thoughts, questions, cases. Dr. Bedi, if you have any comments, I'd be interested. Um, I know you've had the experience of working with family members of addicted individuals, and it's tough work, but the more encouragement and support that you can give, the better, obviously.
Can I come in?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Lance, thanks a lot. It's very enlightening teaching. 46 years of intervention, but I never did it the way you have suggested. I'm going to try this new methodology, and all our families here, I'm sure, are taking home some very valuable methodology to deal with an active using alcoholic. My question is a little embarrassing. You did mention at one point reward and sanctions, implying also uh, using the availability of intimacy uh, as a reward or sanction. That's a little bit dicey in India because people sometimes misuse sexual intimacy very badly with female partners. So that's my question. A little bit clarification on that. I know Marian Garfinkel in Pennsylvania is smiling because she too must be having many cases of this in America. Thank you.
Well, that is a dicey area, and I think that um, um, whether it's sexual intimacy or pure abuse is usually is more often the result of a spouse coming home drunk and being demanding or domineering, and if there's a way for the spouse to um, withdraw from that, or clarify that that's not going to be part of the process of, that's a lot of times false intimacy. And I think if it may not happen in the heat of the moment, but if that's a discussion, if a woman feels empowered and able to communicate with her husband that they love him and want his unclouded love and affection while he's not under the influence of alcohol, that may be a reward. Now, again, that oftentimes, I believe it ought to occur, with intimacy, not just pure reward, but you're again using a positive reinforcer that the husband in this case will assume is valuing, and that's part of setting up a reward that's meaningful. It's got to be valued to the person who you're trying to affect behavioral change with. Now, I'd rather have used the example of a home cooked meal, or a walk in the park, or a picnic or something like that. I sort of cut to the chase and went to maybe one of the more risky ultimate rewards. Does anybody else have any comments about that? Going to help me out, Dr. Bedi? No volume. I, okay.
Let Shashi Menon, Dr. Shashi Menon come in.
Okay. We're not hearing you, Dr. Bedi.
Shashi, can you put your mic on?
No.
No. You can't hear.
Okay, now can you hear me? Now can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
All right. I shall just reduce it a bit. Okay, is that a little better? All right. Hi, Dr. Lance. Thanks for a great presentation. Uh, just to respond to the issue that Father Joe raised, I think it's a question of making an assessment of the concerned family member and their background to recommend or discuss with them what could be the possible responses in terms of reward. So that would have to be case specific every time.
Right.
That's the thing. But what I have for you are 2 points, if you would be kind enough to discuss. Uh, when we are talking about the concerned significant others, we need to look at what is their take on the social ideal of their partner. Because in a conservative society which tends to be patriarchal, we do have a bit of a difficulty in partners recognizing what their models of behavior are in the family relationship. And therefore, their expectations of their partners could be unrealistic at times. So, therefore, what is the responsive goal that the concerned significant other would expect from the user? It may be idealistic, but not realistic.
I agree, and as you mentioned with the other example, I think that's got to be individually tailored to what is the nature of the relationship, between the husband and wife or the family members, and you're right, it has to be a realistic rather than an idealistic goal. But again, this may be a way to bridge some of those differences. Dr. Bedi, do you have any thoughts about the cultural aspects of this? Okay, we're just not getting any sound from you. If anybody else has any comments, Father Joe, feel free to add something about that. I think, Dr. Menon, your comments are well taken, though. It really depends on the context of the relationship.
I do want to share something. I've been very recently dealing with a person who people believed was suffering from alcoholism, but it was a neurological disorder of dementia, widespread, cerebellar and cerebral, but clinically presenting in a temporoparietal manner, which was very akin to an addictive behavior. So the question was, what should my intervention have been with the family members to help this person come to treatment? And it was two of the techniques which you described so lucidly. One was having a group meeting and having very clearly expressed to the individual what their observations were on the situation, requiring help from a professional. And the other is a very careful and studious withdrawal from the participating with an individual's aggression and argumentative behavior. And that worked very well because the result was there was an intervention and things seemed to be proceeding a little better. But my question is really related to the timelines which you described. Uh, most people are looking for quick fixes. The user wants a quick fix, the concerned partners want a quick fix, and even therapists want a quick fix. So, retaining the interest of the concerned party to remain in the intervention over a period of time, that is really, I think, something that has to be looked at, because one or the other is going to give up pretty soon. And it need not necessarily be a hopeless case. It could just be taking a little longer before, the penny drops and then people realize that, yes, something is happening and probably we should go ahead with this some more. Any comments on how you would deal with this situation where, people think that time is running out?
Right. Yeah, I think that's where a shared experience, Al-Anon, for example, can be helpful. You're not alone with this problem, and where you get feedback from other family members who have been through something similarly and said, you know what, it did take months or years for this to change, but if you hang in there, it might. Don't give up. That's where I think having a therapist to say, don't give up. Keep trying. If it's meaningful, keep trying. Now, eventually, we don't want people to stay in relationships that, are either so codependent that they're irreparable, or that they're so neglectful or abusive that it's not healthy. So, there are times that giving up or taking a break, is really self-preservation. And um, uh, maybe that's what it takes sometimes for the other person to recognize that this is a serious matter. I think Dr. Bedi and I have both treated couples where it's become pretty clear over time that the couple is not salvageable. Yeah. Yeah. So, there are times we have to advise people that, this isn't a healthy relationship. But again, I think it's a shared experience. I think many spouses, for example, feel like they're in it alone and they can't talk about it. And the patience that it takes for this journey sometimes is more than people realize. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your very thoughtful and insightful comments. You're absolutely on target. No audio, Dr. Beatty. Why don't you come in here? Let me shift slide. No, yeah, yeah, okay. Here. Yeah, go ahead. Sit down and I want you to make some comments. Yeah.
I think I'm.
Sorry, my
Ashok,
audio was not working.
Ashok, I just
Go ahead,
I
Father.
want to give Dr. Lance a big hand. Just want to thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay.
So, Father Josh, before we close, did you have any last minute comment?
From me,
Yes, yes.
I think Dr. Lance has put his finger on the most sensitive area of the affected personalities to contemplate, visualize, execute into action a healthy, effective intervention. And I think the purpose of this
Mm-hmm.
has been fulfilled. I'm going to have this copy circulated among all the families here and have a intense study on these points that Dr. Lance has said. So the most absolutely invaluable input for us to take our Al-Anon family systems therapy, uh, counseling to a more updated, higher level of effectivity. So thank you. That's my comment. Thank you very much, Dr. Lance.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll hang up on
Thank you.
this.
Okay.
All right. Thank you and good
Good
night.
night.
Yeah.
For us, it's a whole new day. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. God bless you.
Hello. Hello, hello. Yeah, everything is working. Yes, I can see myself. This is doctor. Yeah, I think the session is over.
Okay, the drums?